So, I had, in my previous post, said that I wanted to find a game that I thought was one of the simplest games and start there. But on second thought, I realized that that isn't starting at the beginning. In order to start at the beginning, I need to start with the rationale for looking into this at all, because that's really an essential part of good research. And even though I want this to be fun, it is still, in a way, a research project. I'm sort of analyzing the content of this world, these games, and so I need to start off with why. So, one of the reasons is the ways in which we value literacy are very influenced, sort of in a circular motion, by what the predominant culture deems the most important. And for the longest time, that has been written word. So I'm going to try hard while I do these to be very clear when I'm talking about traditional text, like writing, but I'm going to call that the written word, whereas text is a much broader category that encompasses the written word, but also other examples of communication. Because at its core, a text is a communication. It is the written word. It is art. It is poetry. It is media of a variety of kinds, like television and movies and songs. There's so much to it. And a small part of that, in my opinion, are games. And the ways in which we interact with games are literate on a lot of different levels. There is the very bare bones literacy that is still the written word, because games contain the written word, most of them. And even if it's only in the instructions. The other reason to look at this is, because, alright, so that's what society does. It values certain types of literacy over others. Why does that matter? Well, because then it means that when you are successful at alternate types of literacy, you don't get recognized for that, so you don't feel successful, and then that leads to all sorts of self-esteem issues that then can hamper people's achievement in other areas. I'm not really going to get into that, but that is a part of it. And another thing is, when we don't, and this is what I was talking about, the circular thing, we don't value it, I think partially because we don't know much about it. But because we don't know much about it, we don't value it very highly. And a lot of what I'm taking this from is mostly personal experience, which is not good research, but I will try and find some background that backs me up on that. But I'm looking at film theory, and my recent forays into learning more about the medium of film and the ways to really critically examine film with the help of some wonderful people has opened my eyes to what I was missing when I didn't know that, because I wasn't taught to be a critical consumer of film. I never took a class on that, and it was never included in my basic literacy preparation through school. So I was a very surface level consumer of media. I watched movies and television, I enjoyed the stories, and that was it. I never considered the different choices that people make along the way and why they make them. Why do directors choose the certain confluence of events that comes together for a scene? Why does a costume designer choose certain fabrics? Why does the cinematographer choose to use certain washes? Why does the set designer choose certain colors? There are reasons for all of those things. And good movies, it's the other thing, being a critical consumer, I have now changed my definition of a good movie. Good people who work on these movies, people who are aware of these things and work with them instead of against them or ignoring them entirely, convey meaning. And this is crazy, because you'd be surprised at what some movies do well, and also surprised at what movies actually do things well. I won't go into it. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend people like Cinefix, who do top 10 lists, but their top 10 lists are done in such a way that is extremely informative about the reasons that they are ranking certain things, like the best directors of all time, most significant moments in cinema. And those explanations give you a lot of background as to what makes cinema so complex. Lindsay Ellis in Shay Lindsay or Shay Apocalypse or Nostalgia Chick, from That Guy with the Glasses, depending on how far you go back with her. She's another one who does a really great job. I highly recommend, if you want what I consider to be her most well thought out piece, it would be probably The Others. So it's a look at othering in cinema, how we represent the other in cinema and why we do it and what it means for us. Wonderful, wonderful piece. So looking at that and comparing it to someone like Anita Sarkeesian, who looks at video gaming in a really critical way from a feminist perspective and really examines that medium of text, because gaming is text. You exist within it. It is a communication, and we make choices. The people who design it, we as a society, make choices in the games for reasons. Those reasons tell us something about the designer, about ourselves, in the same way that when we are reading Shakespeare, the decisions that are made by whoever let's just assume it was Shakespeare. Those choices tell us something about that time period, about the views of women, of Jews, of whatever we're looking at, because we can look at it critically through a lot of different lenses. But what is sad is when we don't look at it through any lens, when we just consume it for what it is 100% of the time. I'm fully in favor of consuming things for their enjoyable aspects most of the time, or a lot of the time. But when you are unable to consume it at a deeper level, when you just can't do that because you have no idea how, I think that's a shame. And it's something that I've actually been making sure I didn't think too much about when I was just on my own, because I didn't want to get crazy ahead and then let discoveries from later games influence games I was trying to do earlier. It made sense in my head, basically. And I was just talking with my advisor at the University of Wyoming about this, and this is where I think I'm going to come with it. I think most games, if not all games, can have levels of involvement and engagement in the same way that there can be levels of engagement with a text. You can just flip through, read the story really fast. At the end, all you do is have a very basic understanding of what you read. Maybe you could retell the main storyline and nothing else. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just one level. Then there's other levels, deeper levels, where you can really go and analyze the text, and I think you can do the same with a game. On the one level, you understand the directions. And so the example I used, and it is not an example I will go in depth with in any other video, so I might as well use it now, was Monopoly. On the one hand, it's a boring game, for the most part. But on the one hand, you can learn the rules and play the rules, allowing the dice to just send you where you go and doing whatever seems possible at that moment based on where you land and what money you have, and just follow the rules of the game until there's a conclusion and an end. You win or you lose. And that winning and losing seems more based in the mechanics of the game and the luck of the dice than anything else. That's one level. There's a second level, though, where you begin to get strategic, where you start wondering, is it worth it to buy this property? Should I save my money in case I land on something in the future? So I will need to have this money, and I can't have it tied up in a property. To what I've heard is the strategy of Monopoly, which is to try and monopolize the houses themselves, because in Monopoly, if you buy 4 houses, you get a lot of rent. If you go up to the hotel, you get a little more rent, but then all the houses go back into the box and anybody else can buy them. But if you buy all the houses, then nobody else can buy houses. Whatever. Even higher than that, you could get really into it, and I've never seen anyone do this with Monopoly, but certainly games we'll talk about later, people do this frequently, and that is really get into the game. Think about, with Monopoly as the example, what would a real estate tycoon think? How would they sound? Where are you from? Create a character that's involved in this wheeling and dealing of real estate. I actually think that might be the only way that Monopoly would be fun at this point for me. I'm sorry, I hate Monopoly. I know I'm not alone, but I also know that there are plenty of people who do like it. Bygones. If I got really into it, maybe I could enjoy it. Maybe if I imagined that I was, some sort of gangster from the 1930s who was a horrible stereotype of everything that we know about that time period, and I played the game that way, spoke that way, tried to consider things in a fictionalized world that would fit what was going on in the game and then responded accordingly. That is a higher level. From a dispassionate level, I could look at the game and what it says about economy. What our choices in the game say about how our economy works and about how we think it should work. Or doesn't work, and how we think it doesn't work. There's a lot of options there. A lot of layers, even with a game that most of us have played and never thought twice about, unless we just wanted to talk about how boring it is and how irritating it is when somebody lucks into all the properties you want and you are stuck with the railroads or something. That's in the past. I'm not competitive or anything and always want to win games. That's not a thing. But it's okay. So next time I will try and choose a game and then get delving into it, but I wanted to give a good rationale first, so